Welcome to Creating the Ideal Organization, a podcast from the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania, produced to inspire purposeful leadership practice and transform organizational experience. I'm your host, Steve Hart. Today I'm speaking with Bob Biglin, distinguished graduate of Organizational Dynamics and a 2018 Graduate Award recipient. Bob is the CEO and a partner at the Center for Advanced Emotional Intelligence. He and his team work with clients in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, helping senior leaders and their teams optimize their leadership effectiveness. Through executive coaching and consulting, they offer programs for developing leaders and enhancing organizational culture. Bob has over 30 years of professional experience in leadership roles in operations, strategy, and finance, most recently serving as the CFO of a private equity portfolio company. Bob also serves on the board of the Philadelphia Ronald McDonald House as a director and as their treasurer. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Steve.
So, Bob, you got an MBA and you've got a 30-year career. I wonder what questions were still lingering for you that you hoped your participation in organizational dynamics might answer?
So for the last probably 15 to 20 years of my career, I've always been involved in some sort of leadership or organizational development activity, but always as a night job. So that could have been mentoring. For about 6 or 7 straight years, I worked with a team to design and actually structure and deliver leadership conferences. And so it always been a real interest to me, but it always been done as kind of a night job. And the opportunity presented itself with both a recent job change and a relocation, and I had been thinking probably for the past couple of years, there has to be a way for me to take my interest in this area, which I really enjoy, with my operational experience, combine it with some real, very, very good academic training, and turn that into something where I could actually work with other senior leaders to help them build and develop great organizations. So really doing it more as a professional and not just as an enthusiastic amateur. And so that was probably the biggest thing that had me thinking about this. And I had been doing research on different programs, and the Penn Org Dynamics program was of particular interest to me because, especially within the coaching and consulting cohort, there was also a very practical application part of it. So it was combining the deep academic work with practicum work as well. And I think the combination of those two things together were a major appeal for this program.
Cool. So you had an expectation before you came into the program. How did those expectations work out in the actual reality of participating?
So I think coming into the program, I had a sense of what was there, but I also had this thing hanging in the back of my head, which is, God, it's been 20 years since I've sat in a really in a formal classroom, outside of doing some exec ed work, but really doing it over a sustained period of time. I was in a business school and an MBA program back in the mid to late 90s. And one of the things running through my head is how am I going to make this transition from being in sort of operational and execution mode going back into an academic mode? And that transition wasn't nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. I think one of the things that was my very big and pleasant and positive surprise was the role that the community in org dynamics actually played as a part of the learning experience. So, my previous experience in whether it was the business school or in executive education it was very much about a professor and a curriculum and really just trying to do a lot of the knowledge absorption and figure out what was going on with that. And what was different about the org dynamics program, well, first of all, the format is more of a seminar program. So there was a lot of dialogue that played a very integral role into the educational experience. And what that means is that, your learning is driven as much by all the students around you as it is by anything else that's in the program. And I'd say that the same holds for the faculty too. I find it's a very interesting mix of faculty. We have faculty in the program who teach at 2 or 3 schools around Penn. We have other faculty in the program who are professionals during the day, and they're what I would call pracademics, and then they're, teaching this program as well in addition to it. And I think the big benefit of that is they're, really giving you very concrete examples of weaving academic theory and the practical application of that. And so I say that the community is an enormous part of it. And one of the things that I've really come to appreciate, especially in probably the last year of the program, was we had, in the various classes I've taken, we've had people in the program who ranged from being relatively early in their career, 5, 7, 8 years of experience, to people who've worked 20, 25, 30, 35 years. And that breadth of perspective to me is probably one of the biggest benefits that has come out of this. And I, in particular, for some of the folks who are early in their career, as I've moved on in my career, one of the things I think that naturally happens as you move into more senior positions is you actually get farther and farther away from people who are earlier in their career, and you lose the benefit of seeing the perspective that they bring to it. And that, to me, is one of the things that's been enormously valuable. There's a new generation that I think over time I had probably got more and more disconnected from, just to the nature of the positions that I was in. And that's been really insightful to see the different styles, the different perspectives, and the way that they think about organization and the work that they do and their relationship to that work, how they perceive leadership, how they perceive challenges. And I think all of that together is yet, for me, another reinforcement of the importance of the community here.
Yeah, I think you're right that the diversity of experience is a real valuable contributor to the learning experience. I wonder, as you reflect on your time in the program, what stands out for you as some of the most critical learning moments?
I would say that there are no individual moments themselves, but it is more the collection of experiences together. I think one of the things that to me was of huge value to me in this program was, and this was especially the case in my first year, which was in the coaching and consulting cohort. So the first year of the program, my specialization was in executive coaching and organizational consulting. And for the first year of the program, that was in a cohort. There were 12 of us in that cohort. We did all of our classes together. But one of the things that was an integral part of the way that program was structured is we spent a lot of time doing reflective writing that was to integrate our thoughts and experiences in with the material that was there. And I had written in an early paper that, I think in corporate America today, because of the pace of activity and the constant pace of change, reflection isn't particularly valued, and in some organizations it's actually discouraged. And when I think about one of the things that has been particularly valuable to me, it's actually having the opportunity to step back and to think about how I would integrate what I've learned with things that I've done in the past. And to be able to look back and think to myself, I wonder if I had taken this approach differently, might the outcome have been different? And I guess I bring that full circle back to your first question about, what was one of the things that triggered me to pursue this line of study and to come into the program. And I think that, there were many, many initiatives and projects that I was involved with over time. And some of them were successful, some of them were not. And when I would look back and think about those projects or initiatives that hit speed bumps or otherwise, a lot of times, we would get together as a team and we'd look at them and say, but we had this great project plan and we've been executing against this, and what went wrong? And invariably, whatever went wrong was not something about the nuts and bolts of the project plan. Where things came off the rails was actually something about a people component of it. There was something about, we had two parts of our teams that maybe we didn't share the knowledge that we've learned, or we weren't well coordinated enough, or I wasn't communicating effectively, or there was confusion about the overall objective. And so I think I was looking at that and saying intuitively, there's something missing here. What am I missing here? What am I not thinking about? as a leader in this organization. And invariably, what I was not thinking about were a lot of the human dynamics that were there. I think I intuitively understood the importance of building good relationships with the people that I worked with peers, with those who worked on my team. I was always trying to be a clear communicator, but at the same time, something wasn't quite right. And I didn't know what that was, but I had this intuition that there has to be something more there. And I think one of the big learning components of this was really having the opportunity to step back and to think about that more clearly. And honestly, it was a luxury. It's a real gift to be able to have the time to do that, because I think many people who are working in very high-paced environments don't have that luxury.
Yeah, I think you're right that the opportunity to reflect upon and think about what's going on around you in order to then interact or engage in an interesting way is critical to a leadership ability to drive for a better performance in organizations. How have you tried to integrate that learning in your leadership?
I think the things that I do differently now are I listen more, I take more time to make important decisions. There was a time in my career where I really prided myself on, quote, decisiveness, and being very action oriented. And I think one of the things I can look back now and say is that there were probably a number of times where I would have been better served by not being so action oriented, and by where the problem was either not as clearly defined as I thought it might have been, or that the challenge we were dealing with would have benefited from either more dialogue with other people or more thought about how to approach it. And so I tend to listen more. I tend to think about things a little bit more over time. I actually force myself not to make decisions on things that I think that are particularly important, but to actually give myself time to let them kind of ferment a little bit and to try and consider them from multiple angles. I think the other thing I do is this has come from some of the things that I've taken in classes in the program, is I become more observant. So, with the work that we do with clients, as we're going into an organization, all of the interactions with that organization are really incredibly interesting and rich data points. So everything from when you walk into a lobby of a building to how people communicate via email, or really just stepping back and watch how people interact with each other. If you walk into a place and everybody is sort of stopped into a cube and there's very, very little interaction going on, or if the language that an organization uses is rich with banter and otherwise, all of those things are cues. They're data points to really think about, okay, well, how does this organization as a group of people interact with each other? What kind of indicators are there for the social dynamics around that? And that's a completely new perspective. Like, I would never have considered that in my past life. And, I have an engineering undergraduate. I've spent a lot of time in very technical and numerative roles in, technology and energy, which are very, very technically heavily focused industries. And so I think that I really approach looking at people and teams and groups of people and larger organizations from a completely new perspective that I would have never had before coming into this program.
That's really good. I'd like to switch gears just a bit and take advantage of your thoughts on this question, because I know you're currently going through this. But the Capstone is a critical rite of passage in our program here, and I wonder how you've approached this process. And I'd like to sort of add your advice as what you might give to others who are approaching this milestone in the program.
I've approached this process probably not as productively as maybe I could have. I would say that it's been a bit messy, but I think that I've had a very iterative approach to the Capstone, and part of that has also been me wrestling with the topic, and I've had to take a very iterative approach to really start with something that was probably too wide a topic and to really distill and synthesize into something that was both more manageable but also more focused. If I were to do this over again, I would do a couple of things differently. One of the things I would do is that from the beginning of the program, I, either have a list I kept online in whatever Evernote or whatever thing that I might be using, or even just a handwritten list, and I would just be capturing the loose ideas that were coming to me, and I would start to look for things that were coalescing around themes or concepts or areas of interest. Because really, coming up with um, a key question that drives your capstone topic is a really important part of that, and it took me quite a while to get to that question. And if anything, I had too many questions I was trying to answer at once. So I would be doing that, and as that was becoming clearer, I would really try to spend some time uh, organizing my research around that a little bit better. My research process has been a little bit scattershot, and I have myself been prone to running down too many rabbit holes and having to pull myself back up again. So I've done far more reading of journal articles and research pieces, and what that really did is I actually had too much information, and so the first thing I had to do was to start to comb through that to find the stuff that was really relevant. And that's why I say it's been an iterative process. And so I think that if I had thought more clearly about it early on in the program, I may have been doing that as I was going through the program, as opposed to really waiting to the last couple of classes. The other thing I would say is I would advise people to not take the capstone course as your last class. And for me, that was really a function of the way my schedule played out. It wasn't planned that way, but it was just sort of an outcome of it. But I think that the capstone class itself, trying to maybe pick that up after you're halfway or maybe 2/3 through the program, maybe your 9th or 10th class, you're probably better served by that, because both the structure of it, but the process of going through the inquiry process that the class presents to you, I think is really, really valuable, and I think it helps focus your thinking a little bit better.
What kind of help and resources did you get as you struggled with the questions relative to your topic and also to the actual getting started on it? How did you choose an advisor, for instance, or a reader?
Well, again, it comes back to the community here. A lot of it is just through conversations, that
Word of mouth.
I've had, right? Conversations, for example, that we had in class, which were, there were things that came out of your class that are really a trigger for me to think about the topic that I had been noodling on over time. And so I think, again, one of the things to think about as you're going through the program, you may get a faculty member, or there may be a particular class which really resonates with you, and that's real data for you. If in your gut you say, wow, that is something that I'm really interested in, talk to that faculty member. Go grab a coffee, have a conversation together. That's one of the things that I think is very unique and is a huge benefit of this program, is how approachable and how engaged the faculty are, and how willing they are to have conversations and to help you think through processes. The conversations that I've had, one of the things that's been valuable about them is that the conversations are typically not advice conversations, but they end up being more inquiry conversations. And the value of them, those discussions, really comes out of the fact that, people are asking me good questions, and those questions are forcing me to think more. And so I would say, as you're going through the program and you're trying to both think about a topic, I would also think about who are those faculty that you'd like to work with, who would become part of your capstone committee. Where have there been parts of a class? Where have there been class discussions? Maybe there's a piece of work that a faculty member's published that's been of particular interest to you. Follow that gut instinct, have that dialogue. You can hear. The program is broad enough to give you a very wide variety of both courses to take, but it also gives you the opportunity to really craft something that is unique to what your interests are. And yet at the same time, it's intimate enough to give you the access to have that. You're not sitting in a lecture hall with 600 people, as you might have been in a large undergrad class that you took somewhere that was a core course. You don't have that. You're in a classroom with maybe at most 18 people or 20 people having a conversation every time that you get together. So you have an incredible resource that is available to you there. And so I would say use that.
So you've always been a great advocate for the program, and you're about to end it. But I wonder, other people who might be seasoned in their careers and maybe had another graduate or undergraduate degree coming into the program, who are sitting on the fence right now about this, what advice would you give them to get over that ledge?
Well, again, I would say one thing to do would be to engage the community. So if you are thinking about the program and you have questions about it, the folks in the program office, so Alan, who's the program director, Meredith, Rashida, the team there that are the academic advisors as well, engage them in a conversation. And if there's a particular area that you're interested in, ask for their help in contacting, current or recent students. And it's very, to me, I think there's a great opportunity to engage with the org dynamics community. And my experiences is people are always willing to have that conversation. So use the program office as a way to help do that. I would also use those discussions to drive your own personal inquiry. What was it that triggered your interest in it in the first place? The fact that there was something that triggered your interest in the program is actually a thread to follow. So what was it? Was it something where you had a particularly vexing challenge at work that was organizationally based? Is it an intellectual interest that's there? Follow that thread a little bit and kind of work through that for yourself and try to ask yourself, what is it that I'd like to have out of this? And then use that as part of those conversations that you're having with faculty. There are a number of prospective student events that are held here that give you the opportunity to interact with current students, former students, faculty, the program office. Take advantage of those. I know that there are a number of people who come into the program who maybe are not in the area. I've had, in my cohort, we had people from San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, Washington, New York City, so coming from all over the country. And so maybe you don't have the opportunity to see people face to face, but you do have the opportunity to get on the phone, have a FaceTime chat, whatever. So again, use the community, but start to think for yourself, what could I do with this? I think that for people who have been later in their career, I have interacted with in this program, there's always been some common thread, which has been, I haven't had the opportunity to really dig into this earlier in my career, and now I'm in a position where I realize that my expertise or my technical skills are not what my role is about. My role, because I'm leading a larger organization or I'm leading a more highly complex project, my role is actually more dependent on getting the human side of this right. The interpersonal dynamics, the relationship, challenges, the idea of being able to coalesce all of this human effort and collective intelligence around some common mission. And for folks who have really worked through the earlier part of their career where their success has been based on their very particular technical expertise in an area, and suddenly they emerge into this new role, and there's a big area that they haven't had any potentially formal development in or formal training. And they have probably gotten there through their own good intuition and hard work. And at some point, the complexity of that situation starts to exceed their ability to be able to do that. And I would say that's probably been a common theme amongst many of the people who I've interacted with in the program who are 20, 25, 30, 35 years into their roles. And there are, folks in the program here who have also sat in the C-suite, or they're running very large parts of organizations, and both in the nonprofit sector, in the public sector, in the private. And I'd say that that's probably a common piece of this.
Right. Well, congratulations on reaching this milestone in your life and career, especially on the Graduate Award in 2018. And thanks also for stopping by today to take part in this podcast. It's much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.